Welcome to Soccer Morning on NASN. Here's your host, Jason Davis.
Good morning, everybody. Happy Wednesday. Jason Davis here, Soccer Morning, North American Soccer Network, NASN.TV, soccermorning.com, where you can go to help support the show, keep us going. I think on the back of yesterday's program, it's a good time. Point you in the direction of soccermorning.com. That was a great show we did yesterday. Not because of me, necessarily, but because we had some fantastic guests, because we had people who knew what they were talking about, who have interesting perspectives, and Declan Hill on match fixing. And I'll tell you a story about why match fixing popped into my head last night watching a soccer game. Not good. Not good. I'm not saying there was match fixing happening. I'm not saying the referees were on the take, but it did come into my head, probably because we had just talked to Declan Hill. That's, how can you not? And putting all of that match fixing nonsense in the proper context, because it is a troubling thing for any soccer fan to realize that your game, the game you love watching, the integrity of that game is threatened on a daily basis or a game-by-game basis by people who simply want to make money. That's all they want to do. Their only concern is making money. We have a big show today as well. I'm very much looking forward to this program. Alexi Lalas will join us. He's already in Rio. He's already setting up camp. He is already spreading his ginger joy around Rio de Janeiro in Brazil ahead of the World Cup. We are 8 days away. We are 8 days away from the World Cup, people. It is almost a week away. So we'll talk to Alexi about writing songs while he's there. We'll talk to him about preparing to cover another World Cup. This is the last World Cup ESPN has for at least 2 cycles. They won't get the World Cup again until 2026 at the earliest. And we don't know what the bidding will be like for that tournament. So we'll talk to Alexi about what that feeling is like around ESPN. They're going to blow the doors off this thing. They are going to go full bore. I'm very much looking forward to the coverage. And it's good that we're going to talk to Alexi about ESPN's coverage today, because we're also going to talk to Yanish Mahalik about the World Cup and pick Yanish's brain on this World Cup. You think you watch a lot of soccer? No. Yanish Mahalik watches a lot of soccer. So we're going to talk to Yanish about the tournament. But then after that, looking forward to a discussion with Andy Glockner, who is a soccer fan, writes about soccer, has a very good piece at The Cauldron, which is a new outlet for stories at medium.com, which you can contribute to if you want. Pitch them at The Cauldron. We'll ask Andy about that. But he wrote a story about growing up in the American soccer dark ages, about being a high school kid trying to find out what happened in the Trinidad and Tobago game in 1989 when Paul Caligiuri scored the goal heard around the world that put the United States in the World Cup in 1990. Talks about that in his. It's a very good read, and it puts some things in perspective. So we have sort of the bookend here. We're going to talk to Alexi about the modern way America cares about soccer, covers soccer, and then we're going to go back in time and take a look through Andy's memories at what it was like way before that. What it was like when you couldn't even get word of what was happening with the U.S. men's national team as they tried to qualify for their first World Cup in 40 years. So it should be a good show. I'm looking forward to all of these discussions. Alexi's up at 10:30 Eastern. So I've opened up the phone lines, 347-756-6276. You are free to call on anything. There is no topic we will not discuss, provided it's somewhat related to soccer. I mean, it is called Soccer Morning. It's going to be tough for us to, review the latest episode of Game of Thrones or something. I'd do that on my other show. So any topic that's on your mind, I'm happy to talk about it today. But I have a thought that maybe we should discuss some of these. What do we call these stories, Trevor? I need a name for these stories. They're the silly stories, the nonsense stories that surround the World Cup, the stories that have nothing to do with what's going to happen on the field, but end up in all of the tabloids, get written up at dirtytackle.net or Dirty Tackle's blog at yahoo.com. Brooks Peck does an amazing job of collecting all of the funny stuff in the world of football, and he's doing it for the World Cup again. It's got to be a rich vein for Brooks. The funny, the ridiculous, the nonsensical World Cup story. And here are a couple of examples. Because, again, the games haven't started yet, so you got to fill that void with something, right? We've got the sex ban story. You know this story. It happens every World Cup. Every World Cup, some coach comes out and bans his players from having sex, saying that this is not something we want during the tournament. They want full concentration. And you know the old adage is that sex kills your legs. This is why boxers don't have sex leading into a fight. This is the story that always pops up. And there are several coaches on the record. The latest I've seen is Jurgen Klinsmann. Jurgen Klinsmann asked us at Fusion's new soccer site, soccer.fusion.com, asked about this in a kind of a roundabout way. I don't think the interviewer flat out said, "Are you banning sex?" But Klinsmann, new age, Californian, German Jurgen Klinsmann said, "Oh, we're very casual about all that stuff. They can pretty much do whatever they want in that regard. Families can come in." This is the opposite of the England family ban from 2010. I don't know how England's handling this yet. The sex ban story. Is England banning sex at the World Cup? What about the WAGs, guys? No, I don't care. I mean, it's ridiculous. Of course it's ridiculous. But I'm looking at Brooks's roundup because he's got all of the teams that have put out statements about this topic. Bosnia and Herzegovina, absolute sex ban. Savic Susic wants military discipline from his squad. He did add, they can find another solution. They can even masturbate if they want. What are we doing here, people? Chile, no sex and no soft drinks. Okay. Remember the no soft drinks thing from Sunderland when Paulo Di Canio was there. Nigeria, former national team captain Christian Chukwu has recommended a ban to Stephen Keshi. So that's a recommendation. Will Keshi follow through on it? I don't know. Nigeria in the United States preparing for the World Cup. They're in Jacksonville on Friday to take on the United States they're in Jacksonville on Saturday to take on the United States. Didier Deschamps, France, won't completely prohibit sex, but it all depends on when, how, and how much. Really getting into the details now. But there's another France story that is also interesting because we know France is the team most likely to implode at a World Cup. Most likely to have infighting, drama. The team most likely to pull a France is France. Samir Nasri is no longer a distraction, but that doesn't mean France is going to just sail through this tournament. Easy breezy, no problems at all. England, Roy Hodgson has not taken a definitive position on the matter, but when he led Switzerland to the 94 World Cup, he initially banned it, changed his mind before the tournament began. All right. What about the other 26 teams, 24 teams? Who else? We have to have everybody on the record, though, right? France also has, again, because they're France, and because they're likely to implode, and everybody sort of wants to guard against that. Nobody wants a repeat of 2010. Did I say likely to implode? Is that too harsh? If I say that France is likely to implode, Trevor takes issue with my likely. Yes, I know. They won the 2006 World Cup. I'm sorry, they didn't win the 2006 World Cup. Excuse me. They were in the final of the 2006 World Cup. But here's the headline. France to have their World Cup hotel on lockdown with security guards following maids as they work. This is again from Dirty Tackle and our friend Brooks Peck. Because France is afraid of the meltdown. Maybe it's not going to happen. They obviously are a very talented team. If there's a big nation that is a dark horse in this tournament, it's probably France. Can they be a dark horse and still be France? Probably not. Maybe that's not right. but they're maybe not on the list of your first 3, 4, 5 favorites. So they're going to have security guards at their hotel, which, by the way, is 500 yards from a brothel. Apparently a concern. They're going to have security guards follow the maids around because of reports of theft when Spain was in Brazil for the Confederations Cup last summer. There's a precaution. Some security guards to follow around the hotel maids. I love these stories. England's got a bunch of them. Before we get to them, 240, you're on the air.
Hey, thanks, Jason. Can I bring up a gripe with you? Actually, not with you.
Wait. You have a gripe with me, or you have just a general gripe you'd like to share?
Just a general gripe.
Okay.
You're excluded from the gripe.
Okay, go ahead.
I think the U.S. soccer media is doing a terrible job of covering the team.
Okay, why is that?
I mean, I think, for one, I don't understand what their expectations are, and I think they're asking, like, really dumb questions. Like, have you seen, I'm sure you've been watching, like, the Inside Soccer, March Brazil.
Sure, yes.
I think the players have been asked, like, dozens and dozens of times, what are you going to do? What are you going to do when you're on the field with Ronaldo? And you can see Matt Beasley just looking at them like they're idiots. Like,
I don't think Matt Beasley has an answer to that question, and that's fair enough. I don't think anybody would have an answer to the question of how do you stop the best player in the world, because there's not a plan. That's the reason he's the best player in the world, is because nobody can seem to stop him. I don't think there's a problem. Is there a problem with that question?
I mean, I think it's kind of dumb. I think it's a dumb question. They've been asked it a dozen times. The media seems to be freaking out about the fact that the United States players are going to be on the field with Ronaldo. But yes, it's going to happen. Just let them do it.
Okay,
like, I'm really tired of people being like, oh, Turkey didn't score goals against us, but Ghana or Portugal would have. Ghana and Turkey are like comparable teams. Like, you know, they're not gods just because they're at the World Cup. They'll probably miss a few chances too.
Right.
They're going to get chances. I'm really tired of everybody freaking out.
I'm with you on the fact that people assume that teams in the World Cup are going to finish all of the chances that teams in preparation games don't. I'm with you on that. It's just, and it's not even that they're not better. I mean, for the most part, they are. You could argue that Ghana is relatively comparable to Turkey in ability and quality and overall, but it's just a fact of soccer that teams miss chances. So this every single time a team has a good chance and they miss it, to say, well, Ghana finishes that, Portugal finishes that, Germany finishes that. That's just not true. It's not a matter of the United States is putting themselves in good positions. We know they're not. We know they're setting themselves up for failure if they play defensively like they played against Turkey. And this is the kind of thing that gets Trevor worked up. So I'm just gonna move on here. I'm gonna throw a gripe at you, and it's a gripe on top of your gripe. American fans are too damn picky with this stuff. And I get that the question has been asked multiple times. But there's a reason you ask about Ronaldo, because he's the best player. He is the best player in the world right now. There's really no argument about it. By the way, tendonitis in Ronaldo's knee. People will be carefully watching that. Don't want to overstate the possibility he might not play in the World Cup. It's a long way until the United States faces Portugal. But it is a concern for them as they move ahead. I don't know. Give me another question you would prefer to have asked.
Well, I mean, I'm just gonna. Can I shift the conversation?
You're not gonna answer my question. You're gonna move us along.
Okay, re-ask it. Sorry.
No,
I'll pay attention and think of an answer.
Okay, look, you're not a trained journalist. I assume you're not.
Would I prefer they ask instead?
Yes.
About Ronaldo specifically. Well, I mean, I have worked as a journalist a little bit.
Okay, fair enough then. So you have a base of knowledge. You worked for Brooks Peck? Okay.
Yeah.
Fantastic. Is Brooks Peck a journalist?
No, he's not. I don't think he would like to be called one.
No, I don't think so either. I like Brooks a lot, but he's not a journalist. All right, look, it doesn't have to be about Ronaldo. I mean, we need to ask, there need to be legitimate questions. But in that moment, you're talking to an American player ahead of the World Cup, a couple weeks out. It's a press event, meaning you're going to be talking to a bunch of guys. They're all going to be fielding 1,000 questions. Yeah, I'm sure they get tired of the same question over and over again. This is the same thing we do with Media Day at the Super Bowl. It becomes more about the inanity of it than about what actually comes out of the event. And I get that. I'm just not sure there's really a fix. Like, what's the fix?
I think your counterpoint is fair. I still think it's a dumb question, though. I think I'm allowed to say that.
Okay. All right, fair enough. It's not a dumb question. It's just a question that doesn't need to be asked 1,000 times.
Well, I feel like there's not enough sort of like interesting journalism going into soccer yet, maybe because it's sort of hasn't reached the upper echelons of like Americans paying attention to it as the other sports have. But I feel like a lot of the journalism isn't really pushing it in ways that are sort of interesting yet.
Well, do you read Howler? Are you seeing what Wright Thompson did with Luis Suarez? I mean, you mean on American?
Yes, that was a very good article.
Okay, do you mean on American subjects? I mean, there's certainly an argument.
I guess I mean specifically on the American team for the moment. I'm not saying that it doesn't exist. I'm saying it's like you have to parse for it. You have to dig really far down to get it, and it's sort of like rare gems at this point. But hopefully,
there are a lot of reasons. There are a lot of reasons for that, and I think it's partly the maturation process of the American soccer media. Absolutely, it's the fact that mainstream outlets don't give a lot of time to stories like that, and I think it's the fact that, and this is sort of an across the board statement that isn't entirely fair, but certainly is something that I think a lot of people think. Generally speaking, American soccer players are pretty boring. I mean, I hate to say it that way, but really, if you look at these guys, and that doesn't mean that they're bad people or that they're not, I'm not happy to have them on the team or anything like that. It's just these guys are not the kind of characters that you would either get either outside of this country in the world of soccer or in other sports.
I think it makes them endearing to us, at least, in that they are a team of athletes that all seem like mostly regular dudes.
Yeah, but at the same time, that doesn't make for great journalism. It doesn't make for interesting journalism.
I mean, I feel like there's a way that you could maybe tap into the human element of it that makes it interesting, but it's not flashy.
Okay, well, I mean, there's also an argument that these guys are all sort of very good at projecting a bland exterior. I think in some cases that might be true. In other cases, not so much. But I guess you have a point, and I do think that there's an element of everybody sort of doing the same thing, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Anything? What you wanted to move us along, and I held you to that subject. What else is on your mind?
Well, I was just sort of upset with. I was at the game. I was at the Turkey game on Sunday, and I was actually really happy with the performance. I was there with a buddy. We were just like, yeah, they looked good. We thought like we didn't have any complaints about any of the players. Like, yeah, they made a few mistakes. But like we thought everybody looked good, and then we like both got home and looked on Twitter and everything, and everybody was freaking out. We're like, "What?
This is
were there. They looked awesome. They were the better team.
This
won.
is what we do.
Everybody freaking out."
But that's what we do, and I think it's easy to default to the negative, and it's part of the American soccer inferiority complex, and it's part of getting better as a team. The idea is, and you're talking about the media and the coverage. There are people in this country who will tell you that the United States isn't going to be good at this sport, really good at this sport, until we have a media that holds the team accountable when the performances aren't good enough.
That's fair, but I honestly felt like, I mean, I was there. I thought the U.S. was a better team, and we won the game.
All right. The issue is that because we're in World Cup build-up mode, every little mistake is going to be picked apart because the assumption is, again, that those World Cup teams are going to punish those mistakes. So when you look on Twitter and you see the tactics guy with a screenshot of Timothy Chandler playing entirely too narrow, which is certainly a problem that needs to be identified and fixed, rather than put it in the entire context of the game and go, look, in that moment, Turkey should have found that space but didn't. Here's the other thing. Teams don't always take advantage of those moments. We're looking at it frozen in time, and it becomes much, much bigger than it actually is.
Okay. Fair,
I mean,
fair
and again, look, I do think it's the responsibility of people who analyze the sport to find those things that other people or the fans or the readers, the listeners, whatever they are, might not see. That doesn't mean they have to be negative all the time, but it does mean that if you were watching the game in its totality in the 90 minutes and you saw a better team, that is certainly one way to look at it. But their job is to go and look at these things and point them out and say, look, here's Timothy Chandler in the middle of the field when the United States is trying to drop back into a defensive setup. Look at the acres of space that are available to Turkey. If that happens against Portugal, against Germany, probably against Ghana as well, you could be in trouble. I mean, I certainly think that's a rational thing to do.
Okay, but I think conversely, I thought Chandler created the second goal pretty well. I mean, you have to sort of balance out the positives with the negative. I felt there are a lot of positives to take from the game as well.
I agree with you for the most part. I certainly think attacking-wise, they were pretty good. I mean, can't beat that first goal. And
also, just out of nowhere, DeAndre Yedlin looked really good in person.
Okay. I thought he looked really good on television as well. I was very positive about DeAndre Yedlin that day.
There was I watched the game again on television when I went home, and there was it didn't really come off, but there was a play where he looked completely trapped on the sideline, and then he just did a backflip up the line to mix that looked like it was great. It was right in front of me.
I don't know how much we can put into that game. I mean, in any sense, the team sense, this is why we do these little moments and pick out the defensive errors or this needs to be better, the shape needs. But part of the reason we do that is because it's a friendly and it ultimately doesn't mean a whole lot, even if you win or even if you lose. But from that game, what I took away is that DeAndre Yedlin's coming along as part of this team, and maybe you don't trust him to start at a World Cup at 20 years old. But if he had to come on for 20, 25 minutes, or if there was an injury and you had to flip Fabian Johnson, or Fabian Johnson comes out, I would not be I wouldn't be scared that DeAndre Yedlin's in the game.
I think overall I just want people to be less scared. I think that's what I want the most in general.
Okay, fair enough. I'm looking forward to the World Cup because I think they have a puncher's chance in all of these games.
All right. I think I've exhausted all my topics.
I appreciate the phone call.
Airwaves now, Jason.
All right, no problem. Thanks. I appreciate the phone call. Tell Brooks I said hi. 818, you're on the air.
Hey, it's Goodman Brown.
Hey, what's up?
I just wanted to touch real quickly. That guy said, the previous caller was talking about journalism, asking the right questions to the American players and stuff. Inside U.S. Soccer that's not for me and you, and it's not really for him. That's for the dyed-in-the-wool American, 25 to 45-year-old male sports fan that's waiting for SportsCenter to come on. That's who that's for making the rest of the country interested in who these kids are, who our team is.
Okay, but the moment
that's not for us.
But the
moment,
you know
what I mean?
I realize that, but the moment that he's talking about was, again, it was at a press event for the national team in New York, and it was Michael Lewis of Big Apple Soccer who asked the question, a guy I like and who I've met before, and it's sort of a standard question. I mean, it's a snapshot of what the media was doing on that day. That couple of seconds with Matt Beasler where you ask about Ronaldo. And I see the point in this being redundant. We're going over this and we're going over this and we're going over this. But the journalist...
They're waiting for someone to answer it the right way. They're going to keep asking it until someone says something, crazy, something provocative. They're just going to keep asking it. And these kids, our team has been schooled in how to not do that.
Yes.
They're very good at it.
They certainly are good at not answering questions. And that's most athletes, though. I mean, this is a fundamental problem of sports journalism, that you ask an athlete a question and they prevaricate and dance around it and sort of talk in generalities and cliches. This is not specific to soccer. I guess you're probably more frustrated with the answer than the question, but because you expect an athlete to do that, you put the burden back on the journalist to ask a better question, even though we don't know exactly what that is.
The thing is, if you take your opportunity to ask a better question, then someone else is going to ask that same question that's been asked 100,000 times, and that's going to be the time that we get the provocative answer. That's what everyone's afraid of. But, in something this big, where it goes beyond the fans and beyond even the part-time fans, everything is going to be right down the middle. Everything is going to be a fastball, because this isn't for the people that plow through the sports pages or troll the internet for, and like that caller said, it's out there if you want to really dig for it. Mm-hmm. People like you and I, people like your caller who live and breathe this kind of stuff. We can find good journalism. Yes. We can find good articles. We can find stories that keep us close to it.
Mm-hmm.
but at this point, where we are on the on the 4-year soccer calendar, everything is a fastball, and everything is just simple stuff trying to relate to people who are the part-time fans across the world. Like the sex habits of different national teams. What they eat, what's happening with the maids. I mean, this is my least favorite time in soccer journalism, because there is nothing to write. Someone gets injured, and it is national news in every country. It is, let's just start it. You know what I mean? Like,
well, you can't fast forward to the World Cup. You've got to live through this moment. And I admit that these stories are dumb. I think they're funny, but in an ironic way, because I know they're stupid.
No, I love the way you handle it.
And they mean nothing to the ultimate end of this World Cup, and we'll all forget about them once the games start. But it's not that there aren't great pieces out there. I mentioned the Wright Thompson piece on Luis Suarez. I thought that was amazing. He's an amazing writer. To have him covering soccer in this moment is a boon to soccer fans and sports fans in general who are aware of Wright Thompson. I just read, or I'm still working through, a Sam Borden piece at the New York Times on Jurgen Klinsmann, which I think is so far the best picture, the best analysis of what Jurgen Klinsmann is trying to do that I've seen anywhere. And it goes into the nuance of Klinsmann looking beyond winning games at the World Cup and thinking in a much more holistic American soccer attitude. Everything he does, including cutting Landon Donovan, the way he wants to play, his comments about college soccer, about the MLS schedule.
Let me ask you this. As if you're the caller. Is that because the journalist asked the right questions, or is that because this journalist, why is that article in your mind? Why does that article stand out differently?
Because Borden is a really good writer, because it encapsulates the whole of Klinsmann rather than focusing on one narrow piece, and because he talked to people, not just Jurgen Klinsmann, but people around Klinsmann. You get a sense of Klinsmann from quotes from Andy Herzog, for example. You get a sense of Klinsmann from quotes from Josie Altidore. You start to see Klinsmann through their eyes rather than our basic understanding of Klinsmann sitting in front of a microphone. Go ahead.
He collected information and he drew conclusions.
Yes.
As opposed to just sensationalizing. What are you going to do when you play against Ronaldo? How are you going to play Ronaldo? Like that's just sensationalist.
Well,
that's pop journalism.
But we're talking.
What you're talking about is journalism.
Well,
really.
No, but we're talking about different areas. I got to get out. Got Alexi coming out in a second. But we're talking about different areas. What the question about Ronaldo relates to what's going to happen on the field is a more, that's a nuts and bolts sports writing staple kind of question. What Borden is doing is sports writing because the subject is sports, but it's not limited to that. He's not talking about what happens between the lines. He's going well beyond that to paint a profile of a character.
What's happening between the ears.
Yes, absolutely. So they're different areas. I have no problem with the Ronaldo question, by the way, for the record. I mean, yes, it gets tired, but I have no problem with it. Yeah. Appreciate the phone call, man. Right. Thanks a lot.
Take it easy.
All right. There he goes. Let's take a break. When we come back, we will grab Alexi Lalas from Rio. We'll talk to him about preparations for the World Cup down there. Getting ready to cover the World Cup for ESPN. Soccer Morning, North American Soccer Network, NASN.TV. Be right back.
Flashcards. should know where to be found.
Welcome back to Soccer Morning on NASN with Jason Davis.
Back on Soccer Morning, joining me now live via telephone from Rio de Janeiro, Brazil. The man singing the song you're hearing right now, Alexi Lalas. Hi, Alexi.
Hello! Greetings from Rio.
Greetings from Rio. How's Rio? I'm going to fade you out here. Hold on 1 second. Let's make sure. I want to play the whole thing. It's only, what, a minute and 22 seconds?
I don't know, a minute and a half.
Minute and 22 seconds. And I got to listen, give it a hard listen to those lyrics, Alexi, because that's your Landon Donovan Brazil song. Because you're going to write a song every day. That's you're going to stick to.
Well, so I was challenged to write a song at like between a minute and 2 minutes every day while I'm down here, based on Twitter suggestions in terms of topics. So there will be a lot of songs, or a lot of snippets of songs that will happen. So.
Oh, I think you got to show up in the background because I hear your song.
Sorry, I was listening to you earlier.
I'm glad you got Donovan out of the way first. I mean, you just moved past it.
Yeah, it was a little morose and sad and pensive to start off this series with, but I'm jacked. I am so excited to be down here, and the folks down here are ready for this beautiful invasion that's going to happen. And it's one thing to have a World Cup; it's another thing to have a World Cup in Brazil. So we're going to blow it out, like you were saying on ESPN. And I'm going over to see the set for the first time today, which is right on Copacabana. And it's not just the soccer part of it, but just finding out about the people and the country, and that's part of these big events. And so far, it's been absolutely incredible. I got through the airport in like 32 minutes, so better than any American airport I've ever been in terms of efficiency. So we're off to a good start.
Yeah, but not everybody's flying in yet. I mean, once the place gets really crowded,
that's true.
It might be different. I mean, that's one of the things that's kind of, pulling everybody down a little bit about this World Cup, Alexi. I mean, you're there. It's brilliant. It's great. I mean, Rio is one of the most beautiful cities in the world. You can't argue with that. But there's all of this other stuff, the people being upset and the protests and the transportation issues that may or may not pop up. And, we got to talk about the weather in Manaus and all of these things. It's good to sort of do a little bit of a check on all of that sometimes.
Absolutely. Look, I'm here to report what I see, the good, bad, and the ugly. I mean, and on and off the soccer field. And this is only one man's experience, and I recognize that there are going to be people that don't have great experiences, whether it's at the airport or just in everyday existence down here during the World Cup. We all have a perception of what Brazil is, and in this case, what Rio is, as is the case along anything that you're talking about. Perception doesn't always match up with the reality, and so by the time I'm done here, I think I'll have a pretty good grasp of what the reality is in Rio when it comes to the soccer, but with the knowledge that the circus will leave town.
Yes.
And that happened in South Africa, and that's going to happen here. And so, I can only base it on the time that I'm going to be here. And so far, in the day and a half that I've been here, it's been very cool.
That is one of the more distressing things about these big events. And I don't want to get into some FIFA talk with you, and that's not really why we're here. And we're going to enjoy the soccer. But South Africa, people kind of forgot about South Africa once the circus left town, as you said. And I don't know if I've seen a whole lot of, this is what happened and this is what's going on, and these stadiums are empty, unused, decrepit, whatever the reality of it is, or vibrant. I mean, I don't know.
Well, there's no way that you can, from an economic standpoint, show that this works. And okay, that once you get by that, and if you accept that, then what are the other? What is the other value, and how do you value that? How much is having a World Cup and having the message go out around the world? What is the value to that? And is it just financial, or is it once again that perception of who you are as a people and as a culture and as a country? Having that go out, is there value to that? All of those different things. But if you just look at it from a business standpoint, that's the reason why the U.S. comes up all the time when it comes to World Cups and Olympics, because we already have the infrastructure. We're very fortunate to live in a place that has it all set, and we could do it turnkey. And these other places, whether it's Athens or you look back at Sarajevo, whether it's an economic situation or a war situation, the circus does leave town. And when you go back and you look at these things, it didn't bring in the financial windfall that people thought would come. And in many cases, it was an albatross. And so, I don't know what the legacy is going to be of this 2014 World Cup. On the field, I think it'll be fine. Off the field, there'll be protests and there'll be demonstrations, and things won't go well for some people. And I think it will be uniquely Brazilian. Everybody keeps telling me, have patience, and sometimes that character of the country comes out when you're experiencing it, and it's going to be different than any of us have. It's not. We're not in the States.
Yeah. So tell me about ESPN's coverage. I mean, one of the interesting things about this tournament is that we don't just talk about the soccer. We cover the coverage, and seen all of these big pieces on what ESPN's going to do and the resources that they're bringing and everything else. And I imagine to be part of it is pretty amazing. And this is even bigger than the excellent coverage ESPN did in South Africa in 2010.
Yeah, we were kicking it up a notch, and we went into 2010 saying, "Look, we're not going to dumb it down. We're going to try to be," and we use the word authentic as much as possible, and relevant, and to play to a generation that now looks at soccer and compares and contrasts with what goes on around the world, and an American generation that sees soccer just as anything else. And so, I think it'll be better. I know it'll be better in 2014, just from a practical standpoint in terms of what we have going on, whether it's the studio here or the incredible talent that we have. Me notwithstanding, but I think it'll also it was interesting listening to your previous callers, the way that they talked about soccer in the United States and what they want. You can't be everything to everybody. And there has to be a recognition that there are a lot of people that are going to watch this World Cup this summer that aren't the junkies like we are. And so you have to give them something, and once again, not stopping the bus, maybe slowing it down a little bit here or there, but there will be plenty for the diehards and the junkies like myself and you and all of your listeners. But it'll be inclusive, and there will be big picture type of stuff, but I think it'll be done in a way that you would equate it with any other sport or any other coverage of a big event. And that's where that authenticity comes from, because for a long time it was always done in a soccer way, and that's not necessarily always good.
Is there anything more exciting about ESPN's coverage than Lalas and Mahalik back together again?
Hey, look for we got a new Volkswagen ad coming out pretty soon, so look for that.
Oh, really? The two of you together?
It's one thing working on set with Michael. It's another thing actually filming a commercial with him. So, yeah, we're back at it, and 4 years on, and ready to go. So, actually 2 years on. So we're ready to fight. I'm
thinking Crosby and Hope on the road type stuff for you guys.
Absolutely, yeah. Absolutely. I've taught him a bunch of new words. Some even very 3 syllables and 4 syllables. So It's gonna be great.
That's fantastic. We're kind of steaming towards this. There's this dead period. Yes, there's preparations happening everywhere, and we've got some friendlies to talk about, and we certainly could review what the United States did against Turkey or what Mexico did against Bosnia last night, and try to debate on what that means and where those issues are. But this period also lends us to some of the off the wall, off the field, sort of wacky story stuff. ESPN going to cover the fact that France is going to worry about a brothel 500 yards down the road.
Well, if France is involved, you got to cover it, because there is just potential for, as you've seen, and certainly 4 years ago, for all sorts of good stuff to happen when France is. And when I say good stuff, I mean stuff that I can talk about on television that just makes my job, or your job for that matter, that much easier, because France always delivers. I actually, to be fair to France, I think that there is a new discipline with this team, and I know you had said about them being a dark horse. I think they're going to have a good tournament. They had a great draw. They should win their group. And I think that there is not just a discipline, but in talking to some of my French friends, they felt a true sense of embarrassment with what happened and how the message went around the world 4 years ago, and the performance of the team on and off the field. And it takes a lot to embarrass a Frenchman. So they said, this is not good. And I really think that resonated not just with the fans, but also with the team. And they are going about, I think, this tournament to try to put that right. And I would love to see it, because we all know about the talent that they have. And if they can get that together, they will be, as they say, a formidable opponent.
Yeah, the impossible is not a French word. That's their bus slogan. I guess that works, even though impossible is a French word. I don't know. It's they're not embarrassed by the president being an adulterer, but embarrassed by their footballers being prima donnas.
Yeah. What do you got planned for the World Cup? What can I expect out of you guys?
We're gonna be here. We're gonna be doing some shows. Jared Dubois will join me to cover at least the first week of the tournament on Soccer Morning, and there'll always be something to talk about. So, and it won't be all U.S. specific, but certainly that'll be a major topic of conversation. And I guess, and we'll do call-in shows around the U.S. games, and I guess that leads me into this philosophical question. This is one of the things that sort of characterizes the U.S. Campaign this time around, Alexi. It's the idea that Jurgen Klinsmann is doing something different and that he has his very continental German attitudes about how American soccer should progress. And I don't know that you've had a chance to read it, but Sam Borden of the New York Times has a fantastic piece on the holistic.
Yeah, I read it this morning.
Okay,
Yep.
So you know exactly what I'm talking about. And this notion that we need to move forward and that Klinsmann is the person to take us there, while at the same time sort of leaving behind what some people would call provincial American attitudes and other people would say is our American character, is an interesting balance.
Absolutely. And I think, I often disagree with Jurgen Klinsmann. He knows that. We talk about that, and we can disagree, but also respect each other. But I think ultimately, win or lose, what Jurgen Klinsmann has done, and I think there is value, and I think he does deserve a tremendous amount of credit, is that he has made, whether it's the media, whether it's fans, whether it's players, whether it's anybody involved in U.S. soccer, he has made us ask questions, and important questions, and difficult questions about who we are and who we want to be. Mm-hmm. And sometimes we don't always like the answers that we get. And sometimes the answers have been around for a long time, and we stick with them. I was really the Andy Herzog quote at one point in the article where he talks about that's Jurgen being German.
Yes,
Jurgen is at his core still very German, and I think he has great perspective because of the life that he lives. And while we talk about his Americanness, he is very German ultimately when it gets down to making decisions and the way that he looks at things. And that's not a bad thing. I think that's just interesting in the way that we often frame him being American. And a lot of these decisions, I think, come from that place. Also, make no mistake, the star of this show, the star of this team is Jurgen Klinsmann.
Yes.
And that's the way he wants it.
Mm-hmm.
And those decisions have been made with also with that in mind. And we've talked about before that he's going to be judged on what happens here at the World Cup, and I think that is fair. Are there other things that he's thinking about, especially now that he's a technical director? Yeah. But this is about the World Cup. But within that World Cup, and certainly leading up to it, he has made us think about these things. And whether it's Bruce Arena's reaction, which I think it is valid, because while we try to figure out who we are, I hope that we don't lose some of the best traits that have developed over a long period of time. And there is a basis and a core of what U.S. soccer is on and off the field. And I think that's a good thing. It's unique. Mm-hmm. It's dangerous to constantly compare it and contrast with what happens around the world, because it's different. It's not better or worse. It's just different. And I think that is part of what will enable us get to the promised land. I'm not saying you don't take things that exist from around the world, but don't throw out the good stuff. And I think that's where Bruce Arena was coming from.
Bruce, very forceful with his comments, which are in that Borden piece as well. Is it too provocative of me to say that Jurgen Klinsmann and what he's doing and sort of the discussion we're having is a battle for the soul of American soccer? Is that too provocative?
No, it sounds good.
Right.
I don't know what it means, but it sounds good.
No, I don't know what it means either, but I think that's indicative of the fact that nobody really knows. I mean, that's the difficulty here. You're going to trust Jurgen Klinsmann to pull American soccer along single-handedly, and maybe it needed a push or pull. Maybe it needed somebody to come in and break up old mindsets. We know that there are dysfunctional elements within American soccer, but we're going to trust him and believe that he has the understanding, because he's been living in California for 15 years, of the American spirit. I mean, I suppose that this is as close as we're going to get to somebody who can live in both worlds, but I really wonder if Jurgen Klinsmann actually does fully grasp what American sports culture is, much less American soccer culture, and whether or not it's even too precious of me to ask the question if he knows it that well.
No, I think that is a good question, and we are always wondering about what Jurgen Klinsmann is, and based on what he does, and he makes us scratch our head a lot. And whether it's the Landon Donovan that he talks about, whether it's over the last 3 years talking about everything from playing a more proactive, to use his word, style of play, to having a more Latino and Hispanic influence on the U.S. national team, or whether it's I'm not going to give anything to anybody, and I want them challenged, and you have to earn it, and you have to be playing at the highest level, and all of those things I think you can argue haven't necessarily come to fruition. And I think Jurgen Klinsmann, if anybody has evolved and learned and I guess to a certain extent matured through this process, it's Jurgen Klinsmann. I think he's gotten more pragmatic, more realistic about what he has, while still making sure that he asks those questions and that we all ask those questions that sometimes we don't want to and sometimes we don't have an answer for. So all of those things combined, I mean, I and many people early on in the process questioned whether the king had any clothes. And I was talking to someone earlier today, and I said, I think that he does have clothes, but he might not have any shoes. And so it's
not red shoes, that's for sure.
Right, and they're definitely not red, as we've found out. No red shoes. So I think the jury's still out on Jurgen Klinsmann when it comes to the actual results and how much of this will, as you say, push it along in a positive way. But I do think that if it were to stop today, and you are a caretaker of this incredible possession that is the national team, that it's in a better position than when he took it over. And maybe it's just a logical type of progression, but I do believe that he, at the very least, can say that it hasn't regressed.
Is all of this focused on Klinsmann? And I've got a tweet here at Soccer Morning from Kelly Jo Larson that says, "I'm tired of reading Klinsmann profiles. Give me a Brad Davis profile at this point." Is this unfair to the players who are actually going to be on the field that we're so focused in on the star of the show, as you put it?
Well, once again, you're part of this small but my audience, this junkie thing. So if you're doing a story on this team, and let's say you're doing it and you want to get as many people to read it as possible, who are you going to do it on from a player standpoint? Who stands out? Well, it would have been Landon Donovan, and that's why that story, by the way, was so big and why it was covered all over the place, which was a good thing. The fact that people cared and that it was front and center on everything, that was a good thing, because he's a star, and stars are difficult to understand sometimes and frustrating and all of that, and Landon is all of that. But there are no other stars on this team, and so the star is Jurgen Klinsmann, and that's why you're seeing it, because he is fascinating. I mean, whether it's the way, like I said, the things that he says, or flying in a helicopter, or all these different things. I mean, he has lived a fascinating life, and he's had a lot of success. And you want to find out how he thinks and how he goes about making these decisions that sometimes make us scratch our head.
You're on the record as saying the United States does not get out of the group, as is your colleague Taylor Twellman, and you guys had to say this on television in Times Square, mere feet from the national team as they stood watching you. And I jokingly asked you on Twitter, I don't know if it came from that moment or not, but I just jokingly asked you on Twitter during the Ask Alexi segment, what the most awkward moment has been for you when you've run into a guy that you have criticized on television, or I suppose in your previous lives, cut, traded, maybe kicked when you were a player. Do you have a good story for me, an awkward story?
Well, I mean, just in general, first off, I always said that if you're going to say something on television, be prepared to say it to that coach or that player's face. And the other day, I did, because they were standing there, and I was asked a question. And I wasn't there to do a pep rally. I was there to do a soccer show for ESPN, and I'm paid to give my opinion. I recognize that doing that makes me a target, and people love to see people on TV be wrong. And I don't care if I'm wrong. Believe me, I'm wrong plenty of times. But at least I have the you-know-what to get up there and to say it, and in this case, to say it in front of the team. I don't regret it. Was it uncomfortable? maybe for them, not for me. And look, I hope it motivates them. I hope they prove me wrong. I would love nothing more than to be proven wrong. And if I was on that other side, by the way, and I had been on that team, I would have jumped the barrier, gotten up on stage, and challenged me right there as to why I was saying that. Mm-hmm. They didn't. They probably have much more control than I ever had.
Well,
but that's part of the deal. And I've run into players. I mean, I was on the elevator the other day with a player that at times I've been critical, and I think they have an understanding and they have a perspective, and oftentimes it's their significant other that's much more riled up about it, or their parents and all that. And I've run into. I remember running into Chris Wondolowski's father at one point after I had said something negative to him, and he was awesome, absolutely wonderful. And he just wanted to make sure, because it was after I had said something wouldn't happen, and then it did happen, and he just wanted to make sure that he rubbed it in my face. And he deserved that moment. I gave him that moment, and we had a wonderful conversation after that. But like I said, that's part of what TV is about, is people being able to look up there and say, oh, that guy doesn't know what he's talking about, that girl doesn't know what she's talking about, and then seeing how it all plays out. And sometimes I'm right, sometimes I'm wrong, but I give an honest answer, and I like to think I do it in an interesting and entertaining way.
I'm being followed on Twitter by one of the Wondolowski clan. I'm not sure who it is, but I noticed that the other day.
Really?
Yeah, it's John.
The Wondolowskis are all over the place.
Apparently. John Wondolowski is following me.
Speaking of Chris Wondolowski, I mean, man, what a great story.
Fantastic
I guess
story.
If you're looking for something to talk about, we talked about Jurgen and all that, but Chris Wondolowski, I'm actually so happy for him that he is there, because here's a guy, and by the way, in the context of Julian Green, when we talk about earning it and all that, Chris Wondolowski, that man, he earned it.
Yeah,
he did absolutely everything in his power to make sure that Jurgen Klinsmann couldn't leave him off that roster. And it's a tribute to him and certainly a lesson. But once again, it's different than other players. So if you tell people at the beginning, it's about earning it, and I'm going to reward people, and I'm not going to give you anything, and then you bring an 18-year-old player who plays in the 4th Division over in Germany, that makes you look hypocritical. And what I really think Jurgen Klinsmann should have done is played upon the insecurities that exist in the U.S. soccer community and said, guess what? You're damn right. We gave him assurances. And by the way, he said that they didn't give him promises, they didn't give him assurances. But if any assurances were given from him or anybody else, Jurgen should have said, absolutely we did this, because this is how the big boys play, and this is how you win. And if you want to play with the big boys, and if you want to beat the big boys, these are the types of things that we have done. And by the way, everybody would have gotten down on their knees and said, thank you, Jurgen, for taking us into the and for making those decisions that we haven't been able to make in the past. Whether that's right or wrong, that's how I would have played it. Instead of having this situation where we're constantly saying, why are you taking a guy over, once again, Landon Donovan or Eddie Johnson, those types of players that has no experience at all.
That's an interesting aspect of it, in a branch we can't really go too far down because I don't have a lot of time. But the fact that Klinsmann is sort of, he continues to muddy the waters in what he says. It's not, if he was bluntly honest, I mean, I may not like what he says, but I certainly could respect his honesty. Instead, he answers questions without answering questions. He never gives a straight answer as to why he does things. It's all very ambiguous, and that was certainly the case with Landon Donovan. And I don't know, is that a needed part of the process or not? I guess that's part of judging him and watching him go about his job.
Well, if he feels that by doing that he hurts his ability to win, which is ultimately what I've said and everybody said is important and is pretty much what he's going to be judged on, that he's got to do what he's got to do. I like coaches that are upfront and that are very clear in their answers. I mean, one of the reasons why we all, well, not all, but I certainly like Bruce Arena is because that's what he does. He shoots from the hip, and at times you don't like what he says, but there's no ambiguity. I mean, you know exactly where he's coming from and what he wants and what he is talking about. And it can be harsh and it can be blunt, but I think it's much more effective. Jurgen Klinsmann is also effective in the way that he goes about answering questions or not answering questions.
But I think he doesn't feel like he owes anybody anything, and he can keep his reasons close to his vest. And he owes
me.
Okay, fair enough. Look, you talk about Bruce and his comments that are in this Borden piece, and this is no secret that Bruce Arena is is out front on the notion that American coaches should be coaching American players at this level. That goes beyond any sort of let's just cling to our American spirit. That is a blatant statement that he thinks only an American coach can get American players on a base level. And I've got a suggestion or a question on Twitter from Chad. He says, should national team coaches be capped like players to omit to prevent the regime changes that we're talking about here? I'm not sure I like that concept, but it's an interesting thing to consider.
Well, I mean, it brings up this whole mercenary type of environment that is becoming more and more prevalent. And I've said before, whether it's Julian Green or anybody else, it can't just be enough to play in a World Cup. You have to want to play in a World Cup for the U.S. And I do believe that if it's just about the chance to go to a World Cup and nothing else, then that will manifest itself at some point.
Okay, but
I want people to understand. I want people to care.
I don't you think that I mean, I agree with you. I'd love for that to be the case, but don't you think the ship has sailed on that when it comes to international soccer? That while the fans cling to this notion of this is a team that represents me and who I am and where I come from, for the most part, the international game is just another element in a career that involves making the best decision for your future monetarily, profile-wise?
Yeah, I mean, and I might just be nostalgic and an old grumpy old man when I'm thinking about this kind of stuff, but I do believe it matters. And I do, from an American perspective, I think it matters even more maybe. To understand what it means when that national anthem plays, when you put your hand over your heart, to understand the culture. And by the way, this has absolutely nothing to do with whether you speak English, how long you've lived in the country, or anything like that. It applies for a blanket for all players. You should understand that. And I'm not, Bruce defines probably American player in his way, and I can't define it for him. There are many different types of quote unquote American players, but ultimately, when that national anthem hits, you need to understand why you are standing there, regardless of the results. You need to care. You need to care about what's going on the field. You need to care about how your performance and your attitude and the way that you comport yourself is reflective of your country and how it reflects on the game of soccer. And that type of caring, I also think it can be learned, but it does come also from a background and a history and an understanding of what this country is, especially when it relates to soccer.
Alexi Lalas, live from Rio de Janeiro, where he is getting set to cover the World Cup for ESPN. Enjoy Rio, Alexi. Wish I had another hour with you, but we got to move along.
Thanks, guys. I always enjoy the show. It's a wonderful show. I shall be listening to it for now and for the ages. And when I'm old and gray, I'll say, remember that show? That was an important part of the progress of American soccer. I'm not joking. I'm not joking. I really love it.
From your lips to God's ears. All right, let's get out of here. Thanks a lot, Alexi. Let's take a break. When we come back, Yanish Mahalik will join us. We'll talk about what's going to happen at this World Cup with Yanish, who watches as much soccer as anybody. Don't go anywhere. Soccer Morning, North American Soccer Network, NASN.TV.
I turn my camera on.
Welcome back to Soccer Morning on NASN with Jason Davis.
Back on Soccer Morning, and we go from strength to strength around here. Just talked to Alexi Lalas. Now we're talking to Yanish Mahalik, who covers soccer for ESPN and other outlets, and is one of the more knowledgeable guys you'll find. Follow him on Twitter, Yanish ESPN. Yanish, how are you, sir?
I am doing well, Jason. How are you?
I'm good. The World Cup is nearly here. We get this odd period where we're talking about games that might or might not matter, and players being injured is always a topic of discussion, and all of these other off-the-field stories pop up in the tabloids. And I think it's interesting to sort of look at how, when the draw happened, Yanish, what people's perceptions of what would happen were versus what we're seeing now a week and a day out from the tournament actually starting.
Yeah, I mean, it's always a feeling of being overwhelmed to some degree. You know what I mean? You think you know, and then you question yourself, and you forget your theories that you've had before, but at the end of the day, I stick with one thing. It's to me, it's the usual suspects. I don't go away from that because not that history is history to some degree, but I mean, the usual suspects are going to be there or thereabout, and that's not going to change. And until it does change, I'm going to stick with it. So again, we're talking about the Brazils, the Argentinians, the Italians, the Germans. I think I never go against them. I'm tempted for the first time, to be quite honest. That's never happened before, and that's why I'm not sure if I should even say that, because they are who they are. They can of course be there,
Right.
But that doesn't change, Jason. I think we've seen some games recently where I'm paying attention. I saw Bosnia-Herzegovina. I think you saw it yesterday. I saw you on Twitter.
Mm-hmm.
And amazing, right? I mean,
it's fantastic.
For our viewers, we may be looking at the game that United States play against Bosnia there, and we won it. But I of course, as much as I respected that, I knew that that's not going to be the end product. I knew that not everybody was there. And yesterday, you look at that team, and as I said, if they put it all together, I'm looking at that group totally differently, because I saw Nigeria yesterday as well.
Mm-hmm. Nigeria played a scoreless draw with Greece. Bosnia beats Mexico 1-0, and it should have been, and we always say this, but it should have been probably much worse than that. I mean, Mexico had their chances as well, but certainly Bosnia was the better squad. There's the interesting story out of that game, Yanish, and this is what we have to do with these friendlies. We have to take. You mentioned the United States beating Bosnia. We have to take the factors involved and sort of try to figure out what they mean. So when Mexico puts out a side that's probably 50% of their starting lineup at best, we have to consider that. When Bosnia switches their lineup at the last minute and Miguel Herrera has a conniption fit over it, we have to consider that. When there are injuries that won't necessarily be factors at the World Cup, but are factors now where players are being rested to keep them healthy for the World Cup, we have to consider that as well. And it makes it very, very difficult. I don't know that that's the Mexico or the Bosnia we'll see. I think Bosnia is a good team with some firepower. But does that mean that they're clearly the second favorite in Group F? I'm not sure.
No, they're not clearly. But if you look at it in terms of talent, you look at the players that they have. I mean, it didn't take that game yesterday for me to know. I mean, if you look at Miralem Pjanic, I go way back. When he was at Lyon A. I mean, he was outstanding as a youngster. He was developing at Roma. You look at Lulic. I mean, at a Lazio team that's average at best, but you've seen what he can do. So, I mean, the talent is there. That you always wonder, about the balance. Of course, I don't pay any attention to what's happening right now.
Right.
I do, however, look for attitude, and I saw that attitude. You know what I mean? If you look at Bosnia-Herzegovina, there was absolutely no reason for that game yesterday to be at that intensity. No reason whatsoever. If I were the coach, I would be going on one hand, saying, what are you guys doing? And on the other, I would love it. Now, I'm thinking, why would, those changes before, I have no explanation why, Safet Sušić would do that, other than the fact that he said, you know what, I thought this was going to be an easy game. I'm walking out here, I see 50,000 people, right? And maybe I got to change what I was thinking, because psychologically this is going to be important, right?
Sure.
I mean, I can't imagine why else he would do that. I mean, why would you put Dzeko there? I mean, he knows what he's going to get out of Dzeko and everybody else. But I think sometimes you just go, well, psychology plays a big part. This is a good Mexican team with 50,000 Mexican people in the stands, whatever it was. and it's a week or 2 weeks before. So I'm not saying it's a good thing that he did or not. I don't really care, to be honest with you.
Sure.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But that's how big this event is. So look, there's a number of teams that we always think that they're going to, they're going to cause a surprise. I don't think any of these teams are going to do anything. What they will do, they will upset the apple cart. And to what degree, we don't know. But maybe it'll be the difference between some of the the Spains or Italy's not being there in the end because of teams like Bosnia, because of teams like Colombia, because of teams like Belgium. Because deep down, I still don't believe that those teams are going to do anything of significance. And when I say of significance, is to win the World Cup.
Sure. And there's only 4 semifinal spots, so only 4 teams can make it that far. It's obviously important to win your group, but that doesn't necessarily guarantee you a good matchup. And the interesting thing about this tournament, and I know that in this country, and because of what the United States is facing, it's easy to label Group G as the group of death. But, Yanish, there are 3 groups in this tournament that are, or 2 other groups that are equally as strong, or perhaps stronger than what the United States is going to see.
I mean, I don't know what your perception is. Our group, as I've said, I wrote about it recently, and it's a group of death. But again, I and I'm being careful here and respectful. Those are not the usual suspects. I just don't think that Germans and Ghanaians and Portuguese are as good as they normally are, as good as they could be. You know what I mean? So understand what I'm saying here. You know what I mean? I respect them, and they, at this stage, they still may be better than we are.
Sure.
That's not the question here. But it's it looks scary, but it's not as scary as one may think. At least I don't. And I may be proven wrong.
Okay.
But, and I would imagine which group you got to be thinking the England, Italy, Uruguay group, right?
Very strong group, and Group B was Spain, Holland, Chile, and Australia, who, maybe not the best team, but they'll certainly give a fight.
Yeah, I would agree with you. Again, the question is, and as closer we get, then you start thinking, maybe, the youth, because, Netherlands, no question on paper, aren't as good.
No.
There's no question, but, you have, the core of Feyenoord, which is promising. You have a good manager that's going to organize them, and you have 2 or 3 players that can change the game at any given moment. And that's not a bad balance, and that's why I'm warming up a little bit to Netherlands. I'm not down on them as I was before, because you have Robben, you have Van Persie, you have Wesley Sneijder, and those players can change that. That's why I sometimes have a problem with our team. It's not necessarily that the balance and all that. We can talk about the defensive structure, but I mean, who are the players that you can think that are going to change the game immediately? Every team has to have that player, and I believe that Dempsey can be. I'm very happy to see him playing so well recently for Seattle. There was a moment there that I almost gave up on him, and I'm saying, well, who is that one player on our team that's going to do that for us? So that's why I'm with you. Chile, I just think they're difficult, they're defensive, and teams like that will prosper in the World Cup. Australia, I hope for the best for them. It's a fast-paced team. The different generation, obviously, the great generation is no longer there, unless, with, Timmy Cahill, the only one. Spain are Spain. I think they're going to be there in the end. But I don't know if that's a group of death. I still think that for some reason, I think our group is more difficult in that one. But I just think it's the other groups that we never thought about that worry me a little bit, because they're better than they are. You look at groups like, Jason, Colombia, Greece, Ivory Coast, and Japan, right? Mm-hmm. On surface, oh my God, we'd love to be in that group. Mm-hmm. Now, why would we love to be in that group, right? Last World Cup, we had a group that we thought was easy. Look how difficult it was to come out of that, right? I look at Greece yesterday. I think they don't give themselves enough credit. I think they can, if the manager lets them play, I think they can be more difficult to some degree. Ivory Coast is Ivory Coast. Again, so much talent everywhere. Japan, I think it's a difficult group, to be honest with you. It may be a harder group to predict than any other groups.
That's the other thing that you sort of get out of looking at this is and you mentioned it, the favorites are going to be the usual suspects, but even within each of these groups, there's some unpredictable elements that are going to make it fascinating. I did watch a little bit of Greece, and I agree with you. If they open it up, they can certainly play. Will they do that in the World Cup? It remains to be seen. Japan beat Costa Rica, I believe, 3-1. In a friendly. It doesn't mean anything, but that Japan is a technical team that can pass the ball around. Is that going to help them in Brazil? I guess this leads me into a question, Yanish, about sort of the themes of the tournament, because we see internationally, we tend to see when these tournaments happen that teams revert to a practical, pragmatic type of play. There's always a couple of teams that want to go at you, but especially for teams that are not as fancied, it's a matter of keeping the other side off the scoreboard and perhaps catching a goal on a break or a set piece. Is this tournament going to be more open than World Cups we've seen recently, especially South Africa in 2010?
Jason, that's a great question. I certainly hope so, because for the life of me, I don't understand that, with the exception of the teams that have a realistic chance of winning it, where at some point, even though they're very good, they're going to have to be pragmatic, right? Mm-hmm. There comes a time where you know you can win it. You always know you can win it. And, there are games where you may not be able to, just play, to your strengths at all times. Everybody else should be attacking minded. It's a celebration of football. You have no chance of doing anything, but you can make your country proud. And I mean, why would you want to be defensive minded? So, for example, I've mentioned Greece, right? We've seen how Greece plays. We've seen them in European championships. We've seen them, in 2004. I think it was 2004 when they won the European championships.
Yes.
What if you Greece? You have no chance of doing anything in this World Cup. And I mean, again, when I make these statements, I hope anyone that's Greek out there understands. But yeah, you've done it once, but it's not going to happen at this stage. Why not? I saw that team yesterday that's opened up a little bit, and I was so happy to see that. Under Otto Rehhagel many, many years ago, yes, he was pragmatic. Yes, he understood what this team is all about. But I think you got to be a little bit proactive, right? I mean, you look at the Colombian side that can, you look at forward. Everybody's talking about Falcao, forgetting Jackson Martinez, Ibarbo, so many, James Rodriguez, so many talented players that I think that need to. I hope that this is an attacking football, because there's a lot of teams that are very capable of that. And, we're snobs, I think, in general, because we kind of react to what happened yesterday or week before or the week before that. And, when I say we are not, I go into that group as well, because, just a month ago, I'm thinking, well, Croatia, they're this, that, and the other. Then all of a sudden, I'm watching Rakitic, right, who is growing with every game. His stature is amazing. What he's doing, lately is, to me, he's one of the best central midfielders in the world right now, the way he's playing, right? And Luka Modric, who we conveniently forgot because he is as part of these Galacticos, you know what I mean? And quietly, we'll always watch Ronaldo, Di Maria. We pay attention to everybody, but to players like Luka Modric. And you have Olic, who always gives you, a good shift and all that. And all of a sudden, I'm starting to see, and I'm saying, okay, Brazil picks itself, right? But this Croatian team may be better than I thought initially, because I'm just thinking it's a change of guard, And I think we just don't have enough time to spend watching some of these teams and maybe spend watching some of these younger stars until we realize how good they are, Jason. So I think that the only thing that worries me is the travel, is, the weather. This is going to be a taxing tournament. And of course, we here understand that, Jason, don't we? We've seen the World Cup '94. We see what the MLS teams have to go through. The travel is significant, and I think that may, to some degree, prevent some of these teams to play at 100% at all times, because, as we know, it's impossible to do that in some places.
I agree with you. We can't watch everything, Yanish. I think there's this odd sense within the sort of the soccer obsessive community that you're supposed to know everything. You just can't. And sometimes it's okay to say, I don't know enough about that team to say either way. I can give my gut instinct, and maybe it's based on old perceptions, but, we just can't know every single thing about these teams. I'm running out of time with you, Yanish, but I'm going to ask you, you say Brazil picks themselves in Group A. Certainly agree with that. But I guess the real question for Brazil is whether or not the pressure of trying to win this tournament on home soil and exercise the demons of 1950 are going to haunt them, and can they overcome that pressure at home?
I think they can, because, and I think Scolari may have said that. I mean, they're under pressure to win, every World Cup. So this is nothing new. I just hope that, for them, the pressure will come only if they don't have a good start, I think. And I don't necessarily think it's going to have anything to do with the game itself. But, the political issues there, right? I mean, I believe that, when the World Cup starts, everybody's going to forget about the protests and all that, and they're going to get behind the team. However, if the start isn't good, I think some of that is going to showcase itself again, right? Because it's going to be unhappy people because, politically and financially how much money has been spent and all that stuff. And then on top of that, if Brazil doesn't start well, I think, it's going to be an easy excuse, right? But in terms of quality, for me, they're favorites. They always are, and I think at home, I always think that the pressure is there, but I just think that people are going to get behind it, and it's good to have 50, 60, 70, 80,000, depending on where they play, behind you. So I think these guys have been in every top competition for country and club. I think they have enough. And you know what? I think, if you look at Scolari and Pereira, I mean, they have two coaches that have won the World Cup as well. So, I mean, so much experience. It's difficult to look past them.
Yeah, I think that they're going to be fun to watch too, because the freedom and the willingness to entertain the people, that very Brazilian mindset will be. I mean, they just destroyed Panama 5-0 last night, and why they might not do that at any point in this World Cup. They're going to be fun to watch. They have amazingly talented players. Yanish Mahalik, follow him on Twitter. Yanish ESPN. He's going to be an essential follow during the World Cup. Yanish, thank you for your time. I appreciate it, sir.
Jason, always a pleasure. Thank you very much.
Let's take a break. When we come back, we're going to grab Andy Glockner. We'll talk about his memories of being a soccer fan in America in the 80s. Don't go anywhere. Soccer Morning, North America Soccer Network, NASN.TV.
When the last time you heard it like this? Like this. When the last time you heard it like this? Like. If good girls get down on the floor.
Welcome back to Soccer Morning on NASN with Jason Davis.
Back on Soccer Morning, joined now on the telephone by Andy Glockner, noted sports writer, college basketball guy, but also a massive soccer guy. Andy, big Fulham fan, obviously U.S. national team. Andy, how are you, sir?
I'm doing great. How are you doing?
I'm good. Now, part of the reason we wanted to have you on for some time, Andy, and never on really any particular topic. I enjoy your tweets about soccer. I deal with the basketball stuff. I'm not a huge basketball guy. I like college basketball. I don't have time for it in my life, Andy, because I'm so soccer obsessed. It's a perfect time to bring you on, though, because you are part of the launch of The Cauldron over at Medium.com, which is a new place for soccer stories. And I imagine a lot of them will be personal essays on experiences within sports. And yours on being an American soccer fan, being a kid playing soccer in New York in the late 80s when you couldn't even get the information, much less watch on television, was fascinating for me. Tell me a little bit about about that period in your life and being a guy who cared about the national team when nobody else did.
If you read the piece, I didn't get a chance to yet on the Cauldron, which Jason mentioned. That's a new sports writing venture that we launched in conjunction with Medium.com. Growing up, I'm 40 years old, and my followers on Twitter, a lot of them are of that same generation. And I think the excitement in this country about U.S. soccer, I think really, really started with the run in 2002 and this next generation of fans that really are tuning into MLS in greater numbers. Now we have greater access to overseas soccer on television. It's just a much bigger thing than it was maybe 12 or 13 years ago. But that said, that's only halfway through sort of this modern era of U.S. soccer, which started in 1989. And there were some, quasi-near misses before that and an occasional moment where it hit the radar. But really, the win in Trinidad and Tobago that sent this country to the World Cup for the first time in 40 years was really the first time it's gained any traction whatsoever. And it got us the World Cup, and the World Cup got us MLS, and it's gone from there. And it's been slow progress. We've made a ton of progress. But when we look at ourselves in the context of where we are against the Germanys or Spains or Italys or Argentinas of the world, not anywhere close to they are in the terms of talent generation, in terms of overall excellence. So it's been a process, and it's interesting to see where you jump in on the spectrum as a fan, what your perception is of stuff like the Landon Donovan issue or what Jurgen Klinsmann is trying to do.
Absolutely.
I'm thrilled we're this good because we've seen what it was like a long time ago when our national team games were played in New Britain, Connecticut in front of 4,000 people.
Yeah.
So I think hopefully this piece gave a little bit of traction to the new generation to really maybe be a little bit more grateful for what we already have accomplished, even though we've got a long way to go.
It's an interesting balance. I mean, I try on this program, as soccer focused as we are, to sort of pull people out of their bubble, because we all create one of our own making. It is based on where we joined into the soccer thing, whether you want to call it a movement or the next big thing or whatever. I don't really care about that stuff. I just want to enjoy the sport. But sometimes we don't see the bigger picture, and that doesn't mean that we shouldn't aspire, Eddie. It doesn't mean that we should be pushing for change at every level of U.S. soccer if that's going to make us better. But it does mean that we should appreciate that when Paul Caligiuri scores against Trinidad and Tobago, it's a team made up of college kids with basically no pro prospects, just scrabbled together on a dream, a whim. It was such a shock to be in that World Cup in 1990, and I don't think people quite appreciate that. Not because they don't want to, because they don't know.
The game against Trinidad and Tobago, for starters, and I mentioned this in the article, was shown on tape delay here. It was shown a 2-hour delay on ESPN. So the most pivotal qualifier in our country's modern soccer history wasn't even shown live.
Yeah.
And that doesn't go into all the other challenges that went on. And as you said, it was a bunch of amateur kids. My soccer upbringing, I played through early college. So I played in the late 80s in high school and grew up in the club soccer scene at that point. I'm familiar with a lot of what went on in Kearney, New Jersey, and, whatever went on with the building of that team at that particular point. But just think about the reference points that those kids and myself had in that era. The New York Cosmos and NASL vaporized in the early and mid-'80s. I used to go to the New York Arrows games at the Nassau Coliseum. They went bankrupt, and Steve Jungle moved on to San Diego and Tacoma and whatever. Every reference point I had as a kid disappeared when I was 10 or 11 years old. So all of a sudden, you're operating in a vacuum where you're like, oh, hey, it's the 86 World Cup, but it's on Univision, on Spanish. It's Spanish on my black and white TV. And I can see a couple of games and learn how to say corner kick in Spanish. And then it disappears for 4 more years because you're not really paying attention to anything other than you're playing. And then all of a sudden, a bunch of 21-year-olds end up playing Italy in the World Cup in 1990. It's a fascinating story, and there's still so much left to do. But, where we are right now, I mean, think about it. There was criticism of guys like Clint Dempsey and especially Michael Bradley coming back to MLS when they probably still could have played in the major leagues over in Europe. But right now, we have multiple American players from the U.S. national team that are making, $5, $6, $7 million a year playing soccer in the United States.
Right.
If that is sustainable, that to me is a watershed moment, because now kids have a goal.
Yes.
Now kids here can look at this and say, I can play professional soccer for a living. That was never available to us. That wasn't even a thought when I was growing up.
Yeah, you persevered and played through college. I'm 10 years younger than you, or 6 years younger. I don't want to make myself seem that much younger. But I,
or date me that much.
loved playing soccer as a kid. I didn't live in a soccer hotbed. I was living in Louisiana when I really loved playing the game. nobody to identify with. Zero heroes, American heroes. I mean, we knew who Pele was. That's about as far as it went, because I was, by that point, NASL had already, as you said, vaporized. And, we're just going out and playing. It didn't have a cultural connection the way baseball or football or basketball does to people we either see on television or hear about or in television commercials. And as you said, the fact that athletes make a lot of money is a big deal. And if you have soccer players in this country making a lot of money, that's something for kids to aim for.
And you also see studies. Now, again, these are studies. It's one data point. Who knows who ran them? But you see more and more studies suggesting that kids, 18 or 20 years and younger in this country are following MLS as much or more that they're following baseball at this point. There's a groundswell in this generation behind us now, and whether it's quote unquote American kids, and I'm not trying to nationality type here, but you know what I'm saying, or second or third generation kids from ethnic families that moved here with their parents who maybe came from Mexico or South America or whatever it may be. These kids now are starting to follow soccer more heavily than we were ever able to as kids. There's a critical mass growing, and that's going to continue to go forward. I mean, we have MLS teams now. Manchester City paid $100 million in partnership with the Yankees to launch an MLS club. I mean, this is not small stuff anymore, even though the TV ratings are whatever they are, and but the TV contract is now going to triple. It's happening. I know this has been said for 30 or 40 years that soccer is the next thing, but it's undeniable now that it is happening and creating mass acceptance. Now, the next question is, how does this translate to the U.S. national team?
Sure.
And should we be satisfied with where we are at this point? And I would say no. I would say we've gotten to a very good level of performance, and we probably have capped off, in the last 12, 14, 16 years. I mean, are we fundamentally generating players and teams that are any better than the 94 team? Individual talent or level of performance? I mean, maybe we're technically a little bit better.
Yeah, I would argue that
maybe we played a little bit higher level on club level, but is our team substantively better than it was 20 years ago?
I would say yes, but it's impossible to. I would say this about that process. I think that what happened in a lot of ways. I mean, obviously, everybody knows the story of how that 90 team was put together, the 94 team being in national team camp the entire year and playing as if they were a club team because they had no other opportunities and they weren't going to be able to play at a high level. And then slowly that leads to opportunities in Europe. And obviously, MLS coming in 96 was part of getting players into club atmospheres, and sort of 98 was obviously a nadir. And then you hit 2002 and a lot of that's luck. And Andy, we've had this discussion on Twitter, how much luck went into that run and how much bad luck went into Germany and France. I think that was the ceiling on what you could do with that generation of kids who didn't grow up with pro heroes for the most part, unless their parents were telling them about foreign stars. I think that was the ceiling of what you could do with that college reared team, and with a couple of youngsters like Beasley and Donovan thrown in. And 2006, if you want to look at it this way, was sort of the hiccup, the transmission catching. It took a moment there. And now what we're seeing is not that the United States had to start over, but now it's a different model, a different way of American players going and getting better, whether they go to Europe at the age of 16, 17, 18 years old, whether they're in academies younger than that, whether they're MLS academies now. That's a fundamentally different way than that 2002 team was reared.
Yeah. No, I would say to counter that a little bit, the 2002 team, yes, there was some luck involved in that. Obviously, we needed Portugal not to equalize late against South Korea to sneak through after we lost to Poland. John O'Brien probably should have been called for a penalty against Mexico, whatever it may be. And then we got Torsten Frings and Hugh Dallas in the quarterfinals. That team had maybe the best field player we've ever developed, just talent-wise, in John O'Brien.
Yes, and a player who went to Europe, yes.
It had an incredibly cultured central midfielder in Claudio Reyna, who probably wasn't the right guy for that team, but a very good player. Had a guy in Brian McBride who was a physical, established striker who went on to do very well in the Premier League. Had early-stage Landon Donovan, who's become probably, if not the best, at least the most decorated player we've ever had.
Sure.
And Beasley and, whoever else was on that team. That was, and Brad Friedel and Casey Keller as goalkeeping options. I mean, that was a very, very talented team in 2002. So now you move forward, and I agree with what you're saying. The development system is different, and this harkens to a column that actually Will Leach wrote for Sports on Earth yesterday that actually got a fair amount of pushback. Will's not, Will's not a total soccer head. But what I took from that, and what we're talking about right now, is I agree with Will, which is let's not glorify the past now. We did really well with a system that was so insufficient for what we're trying to do. Mm-hmm. Now, whether we think Jurgen Klinsmann is the right guy to A, be the coach, or B, be the visionary behind this, that's a totally different question in my mind.
Okay.
But yes, I think, and what you are suggesting is we may have to change a lot of things, and we may actually take half a step backwards in order to move forward.
Yes, absolutely.
Because we have hit basically the glass ceiling of what our system could accomplish, in my opinion, for 20 or 25 years.
I agree
we couldn't push forward any more than that. We're not generating the quality of players to do it.
Yeah, I have my own issues with Will's piece. I'm not mind the premise and the opinion. It's some of the analogies he made bothered me a lot. But we won't go down that road.
The Jeff Conine of U.S. soccer.
Yeah, that kind of stuff. I think he minimizes Donovan in a way that's not necessary.
I know what the issues are in it. I thought the macro topic that he addressed,
yes,
I thought was correct.
Fine, absolutely.
Don't glorify the past, and in that vein, don't memorialize the loss of Landon Donovan because that may be just a necessary byproduct of the change we need.
Fair enough.
And I thought that was actually an accurate point.
Fair enough. And I think that there's this is a much longer conversation that we can't have right now. But I've argued in the past that 2002 was in its own sort of very unique American relative way a golden generation of American soccer players. Just in that moment. I mean, obviously Donovan went on to a much longer career, and there were some other players there who weren't done in any way, and there was a wide range of ages. But for that moment, that was kind of a golden generation of American players, and I think that 2002. I don't know that it's bad or good. I'm not making a value judgment, but it changed our perception of how the team and American soccer and U.S. national team should progress. And maybe put us on a different.
Well, that's the power of the World Cup, though.
Yes, absolutely.
You take a 3 or 4 game sample, and that's a referendum on the entire progress of your country's soccer program for 4 years.
Yes.
So we may be a good team this year. I don't know that anybody knows what we are right now.
No.
We're in such flux as a team. We have so many questions about who's going to play where and whether our defense can hold up. But at the end of the day, we just got drawn with Ghana, Portugal, and Germany. We could lose all 3 games. And then people will be like, well, U.S. soccer's overhyped. It has nothing to do with that. We drew 3 of the 10 or 15 best teams in the world.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm looking forward to this test, but I'm pretty realistic about what might happen in a couple of weeks.
Well, I
think anything from 7 points to 0 is in the range of possibility.
I would agree with that, and I also think that while you have that perspective, I don't know that everybody else will, and I think that's again a function of when people jumped into this and what they believe the United States should be capable of. Because I think people will see a giant population and all of the resources and all of the stadiums that we're building now, and all of the kids, millions upon millions of kids playing, and the idea is, you should just by chance get one of them to turn into Lionel Messi, and it doesn't work that way. And I think that we are shorting the importance of a deep-seated cultural element of soccer in this country. And I'm not saying it's not important to a lot of people, and there aren't communities in America where soccer is life, but in a very general sense, there's not a plurality of neighborhoods where kids' first instinct is to grab a soccer ball and go play in the backyard.
Yeah, and in 2014, half our national team's primary language is not English.
That is a very good point as well.
And I don't have a problem with that. I'm just pointing that out, that in order to basically put the best team we have together, 25 years into this journey, we have naturalized Germans and an Icelandic and a Norwegian and whoever else is on the team that I'm forgetting off the top of my head. And I'm glad they all want to play for the United States. And I think, dual nationalism is part of building a national program. It's recruiting, essentially.
Mm-hmm.
But we're at our core, which we've been discussing multiple times now in this conversation, our system now has to start developing world-class players. And we haven't done it yet, not with any type of consistency that we could withstand an injury to a John O'Brien.
Yeah.
Or we never got to see what Charlie Davies or Clint Mathis could really be because of injury and or Doritos in Clint's case. We just don't have the stockpile. I mean, look at the injuries that Germany is going into this World Cup with, and they're going to put a team out there that probably has 10 field players better than anybody we're starting. That's the difference we're trying to bridge here. It doesn't mean we can't beat Germany, but we sure as heck right now aren't anywhere close to as good as Germany.
So I'll finish this. I'll take us in this direction to finish this off here, and I'll bring us to the Sam Borden piece on Jurgen Klinsmann at the New York Times, which I talked to Alexi Lalas about just not that long ago. The idea that and Bruce Arena's sort of response to what Klinsmann has done, and the idea that we should have an American coach American players, and why don't we trust what we have here? the question, Andy, and it's a multi-million-dollar, potentially billion-dollar question for the future of U.S. soccer, is whether we should be trying to replicate what some other country has done before because, hey, they were successful at it, or whether we should be, like Bruce Arena says, sort of trusting America to eventually come around to the ability to create those world-class teams with world-class players.
I think it's going to have to be a hybrid approach. I mean, I think the American sensibility in the American sporting landscape is different than it is in Holland or Germany or any other country where soccer is not only the primary sport, it's just about the only sport that anybody cares about. Mm-hmm. We're still not going to get, and I hate the argument of like, oh, Allen Iverson should have played soccer or whatever it may be. I mean, you can't take like a cornerback in the NFL and assume he's going to be a good soccer player. It's not just athleticism. We're going to have to change the culture here. We're going to have, like, as we do now, guys that they can look up to and say, we can make a living doing this. We have to have a better quality league here. We have to have better TV ratings here. And we have to have better coaching. And that starts from, age 5 or 6 or 7 all the way on up through the process. And that's where I think whether Jurgen Klinsmann is the right visionary or not, I think we need an outside perspective right now to at least shake us in the right direction. And then it's up to us to find the right people to implement it.
It's I've said it before. It's good. If that may be very true, but it's more than likely going to be a painful process on some level, and it already has been with the Donovan thing, and certainly with some of the things Jurgen Klinsmann has done with this team. All right, we're gonna to wrap it up there to put a bow on this. All of this stuff is part of the process, but let's also remember where we came from, because I think that's important as well. And it's not that you are forgiving slow growth; it's that you are recognizing how far American soccer has come, because it's truly amazing, Andy.
Yeah, it really is. I mean, if you've really lived through all of this, and I was fortunate enough to go to a number of games along the way. I was at the game in '97 where nobody was able to watch it on TV because we invaded Afghanistan. I'm sorry, 2001, when we qualified for 2002 Cup, the game in Foxborough against Jamaica. Or the game in '97 in Washington, D.C., where the crowd was probably 70% Jamaican, and you got a wonderful contact high with your 1-1 draw. There are moments along the way that you think about, and we've had a number of great moments, especially for a country that doesn't have tremendous soccer pedigree.
Yes.
We have a lot of moments. I mean, Donovan's goal was probably the pinnacle of it, but man, we've had some good moments. We've also had some really frustrating and terrible moments, and that's just part of the process.
Absolutely.
And, whatever happens in these next few weeks, I mean, this could be very much like 2006. We're not that settled. We're not quite as good as we want to be, and we run into a buzzsaw of a group, and we play decently well and end up with 1 or 2 points, and we go home. And you know what? Yeah. Okay, let's reboot it, and we'll see what happens. 2018 looks pretty good from a talent pipeline, but we got a long way to go to protect that as well.
Yeah, you can be, bummed out at a bad performance and imagine that things need to change and get angry like any sports fan does when their team doesn't meet expectations. But I think it's important to remember where we came from, and I think it's important, Andy, to recognize that this might be one of the most unique fan experiences anyone's ever had anywhere, to how to sort of see the beginnings, the real true modern beginnings of American soccer, to live through that. I wasn't there when the NFL was starting up and getting popular. I wasn't there when the NBA started to crest that hill. So this is something really special here.
I've enjoyed it, and like I've said to a lot of other people, whatever happens this month to the U.S., at least they can't get relegated like my Fulham team.
You mentioned a dangerous word on this program when it comes to American soccer. Andy Glockner, follow him on Twitter. It's Andy Glockner. He is an excellent writer on many, many subjects. Love his soccer stuff. Thank you, Andy. Appreciate it.
Thanks a lot, Jason. Appreciate the time.
So we're going to wrap up this edition of Soccer Morning and remind you again, soccermorning.com is where you can go to support the program. Please do that. We gave you some bonus show today. I hope you enjoyed that chat with Andy. It was there wasn't really any superior focus there. I enjoyed his piece on being a kid in Long Island and trying to find out what happened with that Trinidad and Tobago game and being ecstatic that the United States had qualified for the World Cup in 1990. And for Andy in that moment, it almost didn't matter what happened at the World Cup. And everybody knows they went to the World Cup and they fell flat and they were overmatched and they weren't capable of playing on that level. But it didn't matter because the United States hadn't qualified for a World Cup in 40 years. And it was such a momentous occasion for a sport that at that point was so underappreciated, so undercovered, so underloved in this country. And you fast forward the clock 25 years later. God, man, I'm getting old. 25 years later, or whatever it is, and you look at it, it's pretty amazing. All right, soccermorning.com. Thanks again to Alexi Lalas, Yanish Mahalik, and Andy Glockner. I think that's going to do it. iTunes ratings and reviews, I haven't reminded you guys in a while. Please keep those up. We've been doing very good, but they always help us get more attention over there at iTunes. Anything else? Am I done? I think I'm finally done. The extra time thing always throws me off. It really does. All right, guys. We'll see you tomorrow. More World Cup chatter, more soccer. Soccer forever. Soccer morning for life. Later.